So in case you're living under a rock, you should know that Breath of the Wild 2 is in development right now. The first game was a huge shakeup to the Zelda formula. It left out iconic dungeon designs and scripted progression in favor of a huge open world and survival elements. Much of the game is optional, and you can just go for the final boss right after the tutorial zone. Breath of the Wild is widely known as one of the most successful mix-ups for a video game franchise ever. So how do you follow that up? Nintendo executed the first Breath of the Wild so flawlessly that I'm sure a lot of people are concerned with how a sequel could even live up to it. Whether they can produce a product that can live up to the first game is kind of irrelevant at this point because they're making the second game. I want to talk about my concerns with the sequel and also a few hopes I have for what might be in Breath of the Wild 2. So please subscribe to stick around if you enjoy the video, and thanks. We don't really know much about Breath of the Wild 2. We know what was in the reveal trailer, which is pretty much a 2 or 3 minute long cutscene. Not even a cutscene, it's like a cutscene that's mixed up, thrown on its head, and there's some cool music behind it that's reversed. I'll let you delve into YouTube to try and figure that out. But we also have a couple interviews and stuff like that, but it's mainly the trailer that we know details from. We do know that they are going to use the same map again. So in some capacity, we don't know if they're going to change it, if they're going to add new areas, if they're going to mix landmarks around. In the reveal trailer, at the end of it, Hyrule Castle is seen to, there's rumbling, and then it starts to lift out of the landmass. So the castle actually lifts into the sky. You can't see it lifting into the sky, but you can start to see it move. So I don't know if that's a hint at what we can see with them reusing the map, but we can't really rely on that too heavily because it could just be a cutscene randomly in the game. But yeah, one of my concerns is how are they going to mix up the map to make it interesting enough for a new full game? How are they not going to make it feel like it could have been a DLC? If they reuse the same map, then I can't help but wonder if a lot of players will wonder, why wasn't this in the original game? But if there's the same landmarks and the same paths and the same zones and all the same things that we're really familiar with from the first game, it's going to feel really weird playing a second game in the same exact areas. So hopefully they mix that up enough. A lot of people are mentioning, especially because the reveal trailer all takes place underground, a lot of people are mentioning, maybe you can explore like a vast underground network. A lot of people are talking about, at the end of Breath of the Wild 2, it's mentioned that they're going to rebuild Hyrule, so a lot of people are talking about Hyrule being rebuilt, so hopefully new towns, new structures, stuff like that. And then, hopefully, it's just a big concern of mine. So hopefully they can figure out a way to make the map feel fresh and like a new game, and I hope that's not working against them, because it is such a huge landmass. I know why they're going to use the map again, because I wouldn't make a new map right now. There is a lot of potential to it. But they need to mix it up somehow. So either they make the map more engaging, new areas within the map, or maybe you can even explore a separate landmass that is you can explore the original landmass, but maybe you have the ability to travel to a new land somehow. So that's a big concern of mine for sure. Also, with my last point of reusing the same map, there is this moment where you come out of the cave when you start the game and you see this huge vast open world and you have this initial wow moment. And the second game is not going to have that, because I would imagine that most people who are going to play Breath of the Wild 2 will have played the first game and you're gonna go into that game expecting a big open world. So they don't have that to their advantage anymore. They can't surprise the player and be like, oh, by the way, you can go anywhere you see. People are gonna know that. So how are they gonna make exploration engaging still? They're gonna change something, but if you know the general layout of the world and you know how to get to the desert or how to get to Zora's domain, it's just not going to be as magical. So, Zelda has had, the trick in their back pocket of, a dark world, and they've used that in A Link to the Past. They've used that in Twilight Princess. They've even used that a little bit with Ocarina of Time with the growing up mechanic. So if they could make like a mirrored world or something where there's new challenges and stuff, and you're kind of hopping in between those worlds, that might be an idea. But for some reason, I just don't see them doing that. But I could be wrong. But yeah, how are they going to make exploration engaging? That is another concern I have. That honestly, probably a lot of other players have. And the last concern I have, and this all ties together because I think this is the hardest challenge that Breath of the Wild 2 is going to have, is how are they going to implement enough content to make such a big game feel like a new game and not like a DLC? Because the DLC, it was decent for Breath of the Wild 1, but a lot of games do these big expansions for their DLC, and I just have this feeling that this game is not going to feel different enough, and I think people are going to say, why couldn't this have been a DLC? So my last concern is, are they going to be able to implement enough content to make the already huge Breath of the Wild 1 feel like Breath of the Wild 2? Is it going to feel like a 2? Is it going to feel like a sequel? And I don't know how they're going to do that. So let's get into some ideas of maybe how they could do that. I have some wants. I have some positive thoughts too. So let's get into that a little bit. So we all want more information on Breath of the Wild 2, and they're clearly not ready to share it with us, even though it's been like a year since they announced the game. You'd think that we would have something on it. Maybe they should have just not announced it, I don't know. But us Zelda fans are going crazy. But we all want more information, and we haven't gotten it yet, but we will get it soon. But until then, we are all thinking about what could possibly be in this new game. And we are super excited because, just because we have just this one trailer, and the rest of the game is an unknown, and so that makes our imaginations go wild. So let me talk about a couple things. The elephant in the room is obviously classic dungeons. So most Zelda games, they have these pre-made dungeons that have a flow to them that you can't break typically. Where there's keys, there's items that you need, and there's progression in these dungeons, and it's very satisfying, and it's a great way to do it. And that's what made Zelda so good for so long. But it did get a little stale. I think everyone can kind of admit by Skyward Sword we were kind of getting to that stale point. I think after the big open world Breath of the Wild 1, I think a good way they can make it feel like a sequel is by bringing back those classic dungeons and sticking them somehow into the big open world. Making a cohesive dungeon where you get an item, you have keys, it's almost puzzle-like to get through it, and you have a boss at the end. The Divine Beast had a little bit of that. You had that boss at the end, but that's not what we're looking for. I don't think anyone thought the Divine Beasts were a highlight in Breath of the Wild 1. So if they want to make the game better, why not pick that weak point of Breath of the Wild 1 and somehow, hide dungeons around the world? And as I say that, I'm already doubting it, because with the nature of Breath of the Wild and the fact that you can go in any direction you want, what's to stop somebody from stumbling upon a dungeon they're not supposed to get to yet? But I guess they can make some superficial key or something like that you need to get into. But I still want classic type dungeons. I'm not a game designer. I don't make games, so I rely on Nintendo to do that. So hopefully they can figure that out, and we can get some classic dungeons in Breath of the Wild 2. Another want of mine is more survival mechanics. I think Breath of the Wild 1 did that so well. It was so amazing to go through the coldest environments and need to put on a jacket or stay by a fire or eat some food to make you feel better. Or adversely, I wasn't as big of a fan of the super hot area, the Death Mountain area, and needing to stay cool, or I don't even remember. Didn't you have to wear like an armor set that somehow, I don't know. But expanding on these survival elements, but still making them fun. And I have all the confidence in the world that Nintendo can make it fun. But I'm hoping for a more expanded, survival experience, I guess. I think that Breath of the Wild, that's a big reason why Breath of the Wild felt wild, was because of the survival. You got to put on a jacket, which we all know when you have to put on a jacket, it's survival. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore, but but yeah, more survival mechanics, or probably just expanding on the current ones. So I just imagine the jungle area, and there being, enemies that poison you and needing an antidote or something like that. But again, now that I'm saying that, that sounds really frustrating. But Nintendo can make it fun, but I'm hoping for more survival mechanics. I'm a big fan of that. Earlier I mentioned a little bit about how at the end of Breath of the Wild 1, they're talking about rebuilding Hyrule. That's a big want that I have. I would really like there to be new towns. I would like towns that were already there to be bigger. And I would like Hyrule to recover a little bit from the genocide or whatever happened in Breath of the Wild 1 to make it so empty. It's time to pump it up a little bit, get some population in there. And there could still be wild areas. I think the world is super big enough to still make it feel, like you're lost and whatnot. I think there needs to be more people. It needs to be rebuilt. We need to have new areas. We need to have more mechanics that rely on those areas. And I hope that there's more side quests as well in those areas. And I want more mundane, classic RPG side quest garbage. I think that'll really pad out the game really well. I think with all the different, you have rupees and you have food and you have a lot of desirable things in Breath of the Wild. I think that these side quests can bring life to the world. And I guess my main concern, or my main want, is that Breath of the Wild 2, a big way it can improve is by maybe making the world feel a little less empty. There should be, remote locations, but I don't want it to feel empty. And I think some of Breath of the Wild felt a little empty. So more, bigger towns with more side quests in those towns to give you a reason to go to those places, I think is very important. And I hope that is one of the biggest things they focus on, is making it feel like it's Breath of the Wild 2. Time has progressed. There's more people, there's more towns, there's more buildings, there's more houses, there's more people on the roads. And that can also bring a lot of danger to the story. And if there's something threatening this new Hyrule, I think that'll make us care about that Hyrule all the much more. So, bigger towns and more quests, please. I wrote on my notepad document that I write out. When I make videos, I write out like a short, like bullet points to kind of keep myself on track. And I wrote out more RPG elements ? Tastefully done ? And I don't even know what I was going for with that, but we're gonna go with the flow here. RPG elements, obviously in numbers when it comes to weapons and shields and stuff like that. I think that was really refreshing. Not refreshing. It was almost a big surprise. You come from, I guess, Skyward Sword, And then you play this game, and now there is different weapons that break, and they have different, attack values, and you get to pick which weapon you want. There's elements on some of them. And I think that a lot of players enjoyed that. So, more RPG elements. Let's go with, more armors, more niche armors, more weapons, more shields. What if we leveled up our skills in other ways other than hearts and the stamina bar? What if there was other skills we could level up, like cooking and stuff like that, and it could become RuneScape? What if this just was RuneScape? What if we just make old school RuneScape Breath of the Wild 2? No, I'm just kidding, of course. But yeah, what if we leveled up other things other than, hearts and stamina? That's an idea. But again, I don't make games, so good luck, Nintendo. Lastly, I want lore. And when it comes to Breath of the Wild 2 and the reveal trailer, one of the things that people are analyzing the most is obviously lore, because that's about all you get in the reveal trailer. So if you're watching this, I'm assuming you've seen that trailer already, so I will talk about it right now. At the end of the trailer, you see what everybody thinks is Ganondorf, who was not in Breath of the Wild 1 and was never even mentioned. And honestly, a lot of people thought it was a different timeline because Breath of the Wild felt that different. So now, all of a sudden, we pretty much see Ganondorf. Long-term Zelda fans will remember that from previous games. But according to Breath of the Wild, the setting that we are currently in takes place thousands and thousands of years after all that. So I would like some lore in this. I felt like Breath of the Wild 1 really started doing cutscenes and stuff like that. So maybe it's time to not be so subtle with the lore and have a Hyrule Historia book explain it for you. Maybe they're thinking this through. They have Ganondorf here now. I'm assuming it's Ganondorf. Maybe it's just like a new villain that looks like Ganondorf, because they like to do that spiritual successor for villains and heroes and stuff. But let's assume it's Ganondorf. We need lots of lore. What game is previous for Ganondorf? I'm sure people have already figured that out, but let's reference some events that have happened. We have some, amiibo Easter eggs. And we have some, items scattered across the world that aren't really canon. But they need to reference some events. They need to reference the Hero of Time. They need to reference the Twilight Era. They need to reference, when was the world flooded in Wind Waker? Let's get some answers here, and let's have some characters reference that stuff. It's been thousands of years, though, so I don't know how they're going to do that. But maybe Ganondorf will remember, and he could tell us. He could sit down with us and talk to us. But I would just like I would like to connect this game with previous games, especially if it has to do with Ganondorf. It just makes sense. Hopefully we get some lore, and I hope the story is really good. I mean, that's an obvious want, but when the first thing you lead out with a new reveal trailer is bringing back a classic villain in a mummified way, and he wakes up all demonized, that's pretty cool. And honestly, I think that's a good sign. I think if anything, they're focusing on that for Breath of the Wild 2. So maybe it'll be a different type of game. Maybe it won't be so much exploration, and maybe it will go towards, more lore. We're just gonna have to wait. So those are my thoughts on Breath of the Wild 2. I know it's not very unique. Most of the community wants what I want. I don't think anything that I have said is debatable really at all. I mean, I'm sure it's debatable, but I don't think it's edgy at all. That's pretty common, I think, from what a lot of people want in Breath of the Wild 2. This game is really vexing. It's fascinating. To be successful, it needs to make exploration as good as the first game. It has to bring something new to the table. I think the biggest pitfall of this game is it's going to feel like DLC. It's going to look just like the last game. It's going to feel just like the last game, unless it does something big. There's some stuff you see right at the end of the reveal trailer with Link's hand turning into, or something, you know, possessing his hand. And there's some concept art, some unused concept art for Breath of the Wild 1, which shows Link's hand turning into different tools and items. And that might be a big theme for this game, because man, there's some freeze frames where if you look, if you stop on these freeze frames, it looks like his hand is almost turning into something else. It's pretty, like he's like summoning something with his hand. So that could be a big direction that they go in, but they need to do something big, and I hope some thoughts in this video come true, and I hope we get some more information on this damn game soon. Give me a direct. I demand it. Let me talk to your manager. I demand it. Give me a direct. Now, it's been a rough year, and Nintendo, I'm sure, is doing their best, but we're going to be waiting. That's all we want. We want some new Zelda stuff, and until then, we will continue imagining things far beyond what is actually possible, and we will probably be disappointed. But hopefully not. So, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. But otherwise, let me know what you think. Thank you.